friends. Welcome back to the Imago Leadership Podcast. This month, we're continuing our series on the top 10 culture killers that sabotage healthy leadership. If you missed last month's episode, I encourage you to go back and listen. We introduced the framework and named the usual suspects of these culture killers. Today, we'll hold off on defining those culture killers and instead focus on the deeper shift that's driving this conversation. There's a growing groundswell of leaders, myself included, who are dissatisfied with traditional leadership models. And it's not just a passing frustration, it's a deep systemic discontent rooted in four realities that I believe are reshaping the way we think about leadership. The first of those is that we're human and we want to bring our full humanity to work. We are relational beings. We're shaped by story, emotion, personality, and experience. Yet for generations, leadership culture has asked us to compartmentalize, leave our personal life in the car, bring only your professional self into the office. And that bifurcation is not only impractical, it's dehumanizing. The reality is that we spend a quarter to a third of our lives in the workplace. That's a significant chunk of our lives that we are investing in the organization that we serve in. And to pretend we can separate who we are from how we lead is a myth that's done some real harm, I think. Healthy leadership must make space for the whole person. Now, that does not mean that we don't create healthy boundaries around our professional lives and our personal lives and how the two mix and all that. Of course, we need healthy boundaries. But at the same time, sometimes I think we have set the boundaries too rigidly where we're just not even allowed to bring our whole persons to the workplace for fear that it's going to be out of place or it's going to be toxic in some way. We need to make room for our humanity at the place of our leadership. Secondly, we want our lives to count. Industrial era leadership taught us to play our part in the machine, to maximize efficiency, hit targets, and serve the bottom line. But today's leaders want more than productivity. We want purpose. We want to know that our work matters, that our voice is heard, and that our contribution shapes the mission. Meaning is not a luxury, it's a necessity, and leadership must evolve to reflect that. Thirdly, our workplaces form us. Leadership isn't just about what we do, it's about who we become. The culture of an organization shapes our character, our values, and our relationships. It affects the way we live our lives, even at the personal level. Whether we name it or not, our teams are formative spaces. So the question becomes, what kind of people are we forming in our organizations? Are we cultivating trust, responsibility, and relational integrity? Or are we reinforcing fear, competition, and burnout? Are we helping people learn to thrive in their image-bearing qualities, in their gifts, and their strengths? Or are we wounding them and causing irreparable harm to who they are that they have to carry for the rest of their lives? What kind of a culture are we creating, and how is it forming people? And fourth, the complexity of our world demands new models of leadership. Old models were built on a linear thinking. We come into the table and we input certain things into the machine and we expect a particular outcome. It's very linear. It's very cause and effect. But we no longer live in a predictable world. I would argue we probably never have. Complexity, chaos, and rapid change are the norm. Artificial intelligence, global technology, cultural diversity, systemic dynamics all disrupt the neat formulas we once relied on. The way we've done strategic planning and budgeting has been very much based on this dynamic that if I just put in these so many inputs, I should get this outcome. And so we create these huge, complex strategic plans that they mean nothing by the time you start the fiscal year because the world has changed. And so we have to start making more room for the fact that the world we serve in really is not predictable. And so how do we lead in a way that still keeps us true to mission, but allows us to adapt to the changing environments that we're in. Artificial intelligence in particular is a groundbreaking new technology that's going to shape the way we do everything in our world, and we've got to wrestle with it, and we've got to make place for it at the table. We need to figure out how do we deal with artificial intelligence in a way that has integrity, and that we stay true to our mission. So we need to deal with the fact that the world that we serve in is unpredictable. In this environment, leadership must shift from control to collaboration, from certainty to curiosity. Relational intelligence becomes more important than technical expertise. Listening, conflict navigation, and systems thinking are no longer soft skills. They are survival skills. They're necessary. I really believe that the leadership of the future is those people that can exercise enough emotional and cultural intelligence to be flexible and dynamic in how they respond to changing circumstances. The people that tend to be on the far end of the personality test, the more rigid, the more dogmatic, the more set in their ways they are, while that was lauded, while that was wanted in previous generations of leadership, now it's a liability. We can no longer afford to be so rigid in our way of leading and thinking. We have to be dynamic, and we have to exercise those skills of cultural intelligence, listening, conflict navigation, emotional intelligence, and systems thinking. These four realities are humanity, the quest for meaning, our formation as human beings, and the complexity of the world are fueling a movement toward adaptive leadership. And I think more and more people in the leadership spaces, especially in missional leadership spaces, are hungry for it. They're looking for it. They've been handed old models that are no longer working, but they don't quite know what better leadership could be for the future. And at the heart of adaptive leadership is relationship. That is the new organizing paradigm. Relationship. What happens between people? How healthy are those interactions? And do those interactions actually lead us to transformative thinking and better mission? That's why I do want to highlight a powerful framework from the Center for Creative Leadership, and I mentioned it in the last podcast. This is called Direction, Alignment, and Commitment, or DAC for short. Direction means that every team member understands the organization's goals, priorities, and the plans for how they want to achieve those goals. And they know that other team members see them in the same way. Direction is about clarity. It's about making sure that everyone in the team is clear about the direction. And so leadership competencies that lead toward that clarity involve attitudes and actions that lead us toward clarity. Clarity is the key word in the dynamic of direction. Teams clarify their shared purpose through attitudes and actions that make the mission visible and coherent. Secondly is alignment. Alignment means that decisions, tactics, and resources across the organization are coordinated and consistent with the shared strategy, with that direction we've all agreed on. It's about coordination. Coordination is the key word. Clarity was the key word with direction. With alignment, the key word is coordination. Teams act in ways that reinforce coherence, ensuring that everyone's efforts are pulling in the same direction. And finally, commitment. Commitment means that team members are engaged. They're willing to invest effort beyond their individual goals for the sake of the shared mission. This is about engagement. That's the key word here, engagement. Teams cultivate motivation and mutual investment through attitudes and actions that energize, that engage, that welcome one another into the discussions and into the leadership spaces. So this is a new paradigm of leadership. The old paradigm was that of I invest my inputs into the machine, into the manufacturing line, and I expect to get these outcomes. It was very linear. It was very predictable. And our whole planning and our whole way of thinking was based on what inputs I put in. But for the adaptive leadership we need for the future, we cannot think in terms of input. We have to think about leadership outcomes. Those outcomes are direction, alignment, and commitment. And the theory is that no matter what is happening within the team, if the outcomes of direction, alignment, and commitment are happening, then leadership is happening in the team. It doesn't matter who the leadership positions, who's holding leadership positions. If people are functioning in the team in such a collaborative, relationally strong, healthy way that direction and alignment and commitment are happening, then leadership is happening. That is the paradigm for adaptive leadership for the future. So as we move forward in this series, we'll be asking, well, what gets in the way of direction and alignment and commitment? What patterns sabotage clarity and coordination and engagement? And those are the 10 big culture killers of effective leadership team. We have to be aware of them because now it's not just about making sure that the inputs are quality. That's still important. I still need to bring the best of my abilities and my talents and skills and resources to the table and input them into the process. But even more so now, we are being asked as teams to ensure that the culture, the interactions between people are so healthy that transformative relationships and interactions can occur in that team context and create direction and alignment and commitment. Let's turn now to two of the most corrosive culture killers I've seen in leadership teams, the soundproof room and stories that burn. These are the first two of the big 10, and we'll eventually get through all 10 of them, but today we're going to go through a deeper dive into the soundproof room and stories that burn. These two often work in tandem. One silences and the other distorts, and together they erode the trust, clarity, and engagement that adaptive leadership depends on. Let's start with the soundproof room. This culture killer shows up when leaders stop listening. They may nod politely, offer a vague, "I hear you," or even repeat back what's been said, but they don't absorb it. They don't let it shape their thinking. Instead, they operate in an echo chamber, guided by their own instincts, experience, and assumptions. It's a leadership posture that says, unless I've personally felt it or experienced it, it must not be real. But here's the truth. Every person on your team sees the organization from a different seat. Their vantage point matters. And even though you may not be experiencing what they're experiencing, that doesn't mean that it's not real. If they're experiencing, if it's creating real pain for them, it's an issue for the whole team. And we have to listen to what they're saying. We have to ask intelligent questions, and we need to absorb what they're telling us because it has the potential to shape the way we think about our mission and improve our teamwork. Their vantage point matters. Their experience matters. And if they're telling you something is broken, painful, or confusing, your job is not to argue or defend it. Your job is to ask better questions. You honor people when you ask honoring questions. Don't tell them how they're supposed to think or feel. That's just belittling and it's dehumanizing. We need to ask really strong, intelligent questions that invite them to the table and say, tell me more. I want to understand this from your perspective. And as a team, we're going to get around this. It's going to give us a more holistic view of this issue than we would have if we didn't listen to you. And I believe we'll be better for it. The soundproof room is built on poor listening habits and defensive communication. It includes condescension, dismissiveness, and a refusal to engage in appreciative inquiry. And when leaders consistently fail to listen, team members feel sidelined. They stop speaking up, they stop trusting, and the team loses its ability to learn, adapt, and grow. I believe that the antidote to the soundproof room is appreciative inquiry. And this is a practice that sounds exactly like this is a practice that is exactly like what it sounds. It's appreciative, it's appreciating, and it's inquiry. It's asking questions. So it's asking questions that appreciate what is good, what is life-giving, what is valuable about what people are bringing to the table. How can we use that to make us better? It's a practice of asking questions that honor the speaker's experience and invite deeper understanding. Questions like, help me understand how this is impacting your work. What do you see from your seat that I might be missing? What strengths can we build on as we navigate this challenge? These kinds of questions dismantle the soundproof room. They create space for anomalies, those dissonant observations that don't fit our current paradigm, but might just be the key to transformation. Thomas Kuhn wrote a very important work in which he talks about the fact that paradigms don't shift easily. Paradigms are so deeply entrenched in the way that we think and operate that we will plow through with those paradigms even when we have information that directly conflicts with those paradigms. We will stay with those paradigms. They don't easily shift. But when enough anomalies accumulate, they force us to rethink everything. That's true in science and it's true in leadership. Now let's talk about stories that burn. This culture killer is more subtle, but it's just as destructive. It shows up when leaders jump to conclusions, project assumptions, and act out narratives that haven't been tested. These stories often sound like, she's always difficult, or he's not a team player, or they're just resistant to change. And once these stories take root, they spread. And they actually shape the way that we see other people. Suddenly they're not human beings, suddenly they are a problem. They shape decisions, they influence relationships, they justify harmful behaviors, whatever that is, scapegoating, sidelining, criticizing, whatever that harmful behavior is. Those are stories that burn, they cut people down. The tragedy is that these stories often feel righteous to the storyteller. Leaders think they're protecting the culture, defending the mission, or standing up for what's right. But in reality, they're burning bridges. They're not doing something that's redemptive for the mission. They're destroying the very voices and perspectives that they need, even if they're hard to hear. They're hurting people, and they're shutting down the very conversations that could lead to healing and innovation, to new paradigms that could actually expand the horizons of our mission. Emotional intelligence is the key here. Mature leaders recognize that their reactions are often shaped not by facts, but by the stories they're telling themselves about those facts. And they have the humility to pause and say, I need more information. That's where the SBI framework comes in: situation, behavior, and impact. This is another framework put out by the Center for Creative Leadership, and I find it very simple but very, very impactful. It's a simple tool for navigating difficult conversations and giving feedback without judgment or escalation. First, describe the situation. That's the S. Describe the situation, the specific moment, the context, the interaction you're referring to. This is really an important part of starting the conversation because it anchors the conversation in a real time and place, in a context, and it makes sure that you and the others that you're in conversation with are all in the same place. It's taking everyone back to that moment and making sure we're all having the same conversation about the same event or circumstance. We're not judging, we're not throwing out tantalizing words that just sort of cause dissension. We're just describing the facts. It was on this day, we were meeting, we were talking about this. You're just describing the situation so that we're all anchored to the right time and place. Secondly is name the behavior. That's the B. Name the behavior. What was said or done without interpretation or accusation. We're not making judgment. You might say something like, I was explaining how we do our strategic planning and I wasn't done. You interrupted me in order to say that. I'm just telling you the facts of what happened. I'm not judging it. I'm not saying you were rude, you were a jerk. I'm just saying this is what happened. This was the behavior I observed. And then finally, we share the impact of that behavior or that attitude. That's the I. How did that behavior affect you or the team? That's where you can say things like, you interrupted me and I felt like You didn't hear some very important perspective that I needed to share with you to help us shape that decision. You cut me off before I had a chance to add that to the discussion. And the impact of that is I believe that we made a decision based on faulty information. Again, I'm not judging the person. I'm not cutting them down. I'm not calling them names. I'm just saying this happened and it affected me in this way. And so that person understands that what they did or what they said or what attitude they had affected you or the team in a way that maybe created something in the culture that shut down the quality of transformative exchanges, that shut down the ability to have better direction, alignment, and commitment. This framework anchors the conversation in reality. It invites clarity, not conflict, and it opens the door for mutual understanding and repair. When leaders use SBI and appreciative inquiry together, they create a culture where stories are co-authored, not imposed. They're formed together, where meaning is built collaboratively, and where people feel safe enough to speak, listen, and grow. Remember the key words of a direction, alignment, and commitment. They build clarity. They build direction that's clear. They build alignment. They coordinate resources and times around that direction. So they clarify, they coordinate, and finally they engage. They have commitment to be all in on this thing together as a team. Appreciative inquiry and the SBI framework and other tools like that help us to do that in the midst of our team discussions and our teamwork. So let me ask you, where are the soundproof rooms in your leadership culture, and what stories are burning? How might you begin to dismantle them, not with defensiveness, but with curiosity? These two culture killers, silencing and storytelling, are deeply entrenched in traditional leadership models. It's the nature of the way the models work. If I'm the leader, if I'm the supreme one and I know everything, then I'm inevitably going to be invited to tell stories that burn or to silence voices that are going to contradict me. But if my goal as a leader and as a leadership team, if the goal is to create direction, alignment, and commitment, I am going to act fundamentally different when I hear things that disturb, when I hear things that shake my paradigm. I'm going to be open. I'm not the hero, I'm the host. I'm moving from being the hero to the host. That's an important mantra to keep in mind. What moves us as leaders from being the hero to the host? How can we choose a different way? A way that honors complexity, welcomes difference, and builds trust through relationship. And that's the heart of adoptive leadership. And it's the heart of Imago Leadership, of the mission of God. So as you reflect on today's episode, I invite you to take a step back, ask a better question. Whether you're leading a team, mentoring a colleague, or navigating conflict, pause, listen, and ask with appreciation. You might be surprised by what you learn. Next time, we'll explore conflict with a compass, and hopefully we'll get into the next one, the stunted mirror, as well. And we'll continue unpacking the remaining culture killers. Until then, may you lead with love, listen with humility, and cultivate a culture where every voice matters. Grace and peace, friends. See you next time.